Welcome everyone. I'm Trevor Mahy, and I'm from Xi'an, Jiaotong-Liverpool University in Suzhou, China, where I'm an EAP practitioner, but I'm also the chair of the university's Research Ethics Review panel. So I oversee all research ethics at the university. Today, I want to move beyond abstract, high-level institutional policies and focus on what responsible and ethical AI use actually looks like for researchers on the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a practical, participant-centered framework that I have developed and implemented at XJTLU. So I think it goes without saying, even though it was just said in the plenary, AI is rapidly transforming EAP curriculum, materials, design, assessment, and obviously research as well. Now, I am going to reference that recent editorial in JEEP, which has pointed out we are in the midst of, if you like, a gold rush when it comes to Gen AI research, especially when it comes to studies of student usage or perceptions. That being said, though, quantity does not mean quality. And I think we have sort of noticed JEEP and many other journals, they are getting inundated with sort of superficial or redundant studies. And as a sort of counterpoint to the one from Ken Highland, I do agree with Professor Hu that this bandwagon jumping does risk crowding out other EAP research. So what I want to do actually is ask a critical question. Rather than just studying AI, can AI actually help revitalize our EAP scholarship by boosting our own practitioner research? So I think the answer lies not only in obviously those tantalizing efficiencies, but also in the opportunities for enhancement. When we're looking at efficiencies as practitioners, we are often juggling heavy teaching and administrative loads. Right, so we see the potential for AI if it could automate the transcription of interviews, potentially for initial thematic coding or analyzing complex student discourse. But more collaboratively, some of us are starting to see these tools for bouncing ideas, refining research design, argumentative structuring of our papers. If we're taking all this into account, we're just kind of getting to the point now where it seems like AI is almost necessary if we're to find the time to do the scholarship given these increasing pressures. But that brings with it a problem, right? So while we have plenty of rules for how our students should use AI, practical step-by-step guidance for using AI in our own scholarship remains scarce. Right? The UK Research Integrity Office has an excellent principle-based framework, but it's ultimately a high-level guide. Right? This is true, I would say, for most institutional policies that I have been able to read. There are lots of principles for ethical and responsible use, but they're abstract. Right? Where there is a big difference, I think, is with teaching and learning and with research. So there are a lot more operational guidelines when it comes to teaching and learning for AI use, very few for research. So I think this governance gap, if you want to use that phrase, creates kind of a dual reality. So on the one hand, we definitely have shadow AI use. So we know researchers are using it without ethical approval, without participant consent. On the other hand, you have practitioner hesitancy, where researchers may be avoiding it altogether because it's not explicitly allowed. They don't want to inadvertently breach research ethics. So we have this kind of problem by this governance gap. So how do we bridge it? Right? It's not that big a chasm as Gamma would like us to be, but it is definitely something we need to bridge. So at XJTLU, rather than just creating yet another policy, what I did is I embedded explicit granular AI considerations directly into our existing research ethics application forms and workflow. So a key innovation here is we're moving just from a simple yes, no, are you going to use AI for research towards a risk stratified, purpose-specific model. Right? So this shift explicitly enables the ethical use of AI for our researchers. It empowers ethics reviewers to assess the risk proportionally, and as I want to focus on today, it preserves participant agency. To support this operational workflow, I've also developed supplementary guidance. It has principles, but then underneath each principle, it has a how to put this principle into practice, exactly what you need to do in terms of the ethics application, participant information sheet, consent. So we're trying to shift the focus from policing AI to empowering responsible use. But how do we actually operationalize this? All right. So this is not a sort of bureaucratic hurdle. What we have done, the heart of it is an AI tool use matrix, right? So this requires the researcher to carefully consider every AI tool that they plan to use with human participant data. For each AI tool, they need to explicitly justify its purpose, your access type, and we'll come back to that, and the data security measures. So this approach does two things. First, it forces the researcher into critical reflection. So why am I using this specific tool for this specific task? Does it enhance the research, and is the risk to the participant justified? So when they're doing this reflection, it often reveals hidden risks. For instance, many well-intentioned researchers upload data to free AI tools, right? They may be unaware that they are inadvertently training these corporate AI models on their, let's say, students' vulnerable voices, right? Quite literally in the case of transcription tools, right? Second, for ethics reviewers, it provides the necessary information to assess the risk proportionally. So they can see everything they need to know about how the researcher wants to use AI. So this, I hope, transforms AI disclosure from a tick box exercise into something more meaningful, more transparent. To make that AI tool use matrix works, researchers need a common vocabulary for data security. Right? So this brings us to our somewhat elaborate 6-level AI security hierarchy. So we have categorized all the different types of AI access by risk. Right? So at the top, level 1 in nice green is highly secure local large language models that run entirely on the researcher's device. There's zero external data transfer. Right? Then you're going through all the way down to your typical ChatGPT access through the web with no privacy mode, right? Where you can basically guarantee OpenAI is using your data for training purposes. Now, our guiding principle is proportionality. So the level of security must mirror the sensitivity of the participant data. So researchers are expected and required to default to the most secure environment capable of performing the task. So if they want to use a lower security AI tool, they need to get approval for it. They need to justify why can't a more secure tool do this task. We also have a non-negotiable boundary. So if you're using sensitive information, say student performance scores, identifiable information, or biometric data, then you can't upload it to a public AI tool that doesn't have a privacy mode. So those tools are just a last resort for something that's fully anonymized and not secure. So what we're trying to do is make sure that participant welfare always overrides the convenience of a high-performance tool. So, hidden risks, right? I would say perhaps maybe the most common use of AI at the moment in our field for research is for transcription, right? We are naturally tempted by the efficiency gains of having AI output a transcription in a matter of minutes, rather than it taking us hours and hours to do pretty much the same thing. However, it does introduce an ethical dilemma. Right? So if you have a transcript that you produce yourself, you can anonymize it. You can delete the participant name, give them a pseudonym. You can't do that with a voice or a face. It's an immutable biometric identifier. So as soon as you upload that audio file, you're sending that unique biometric identifier to an external corporate server. Participant has no control over how the company stores, retains, or uses their voice print. So for this reason, our framework recommends a local on-device processing for AI transcription, and it's required for anything that's sensitive. Now, don't panic. You don't actually need a computer science degree to be able to make this ethical choice and to protect your participants. So the workflow is actually straightforward. You just record using any standard recorder. You transcribe using a free model that you can download to your own computer. So OpenAI Whisper is probably the most powerful. Google AI Studio, which is now available on sort of top of the line smartphones. It has an audio scribe, so you can do on device on your smartphone. Right? And then, as you would normally, you anonymize the resulting text file. Right? So this way, the audio file never leaves your device. So it is significantly more secure. Now, if local AI transcription is genuinely not feasible, right, then our framework does allow you to use a cloud-based tool, but you need to get separate participant consent, and you need to warn them about the biometric identification risk. Now, I want to take this moment to reframe how we look at cloud-based AI tools. So setting up a local AI model might sound intimidating, but this is actually the perfect use case for your favorite chatbot. So instead of asking ChatGPT to transcribe an interview, right, ask it to teach you how to set up OpenAI's Whisper on your computer. Right? Instead of uploading a data set and asking it to analyze it, ask it to teach you how to set up software like SPSS, how to create the syntax for a given statistical test. Right? This way, what you're doing is you're using the cloud AI tool to build your own local technical capacity, but you're keeping all the sensitive data entirely in your own hands. Right? Just as an aside, never ask an LLM to do quantitative data analysis. It's a probabilistic text generator. It will make up numbers. So that's just a word of warning. All right, now, sorry, going the wrong way. Let's look at collecting AI interaction data. So this is another popular use case for researchers and AI. What we're seeing at XJTLU, and I'm sure elsewhere, is an evolution in how this has happened. So the earlier trend, people wanted to collect and analyze student chat logs from public third-party AI tools. So your primary ethical risk here is data harvesting by the external provider, right? And also potentially the student giving you their chat log that reveals something rather sensitive that they didn't mean to. So our framework addresses this by requiring explicit participant warnings and some practical mitigation strategies. However, what we're now seeing is practitioners developing their own bespoke AI agents or customized tools, and they're conducting user experience studies. Right? This is extremely popular at XJTLU, where we do have institutional infrastructure to create AI agents. But what this does is it shifts the ethical dynamic entirely, because now the researcher has the back-end access to the interaction logs. So the risk moves from external harvesting to internal harvesting, right? Now the researcher is able to see everything. So to govern this, we require researchers to transparently disclose their back-end access, who has it, what is the server security, and are you going to use those participant inputs to improve your AI agent, right? You need to tell them that. So by distinguishing between these third-party tools and researcher-controlled ones, we provide a sort of proportionate governance for both established and emerging practices. Now, the next one is more about an ethical challenge, which is when we want to analyze our own students' coursework. Right? So we often ask them to participate and provide their writing samples for our research projects. But we often don't think about the inherent power imbalance, right? So students may feel reluctant to withhold consent, but they may also fear negative consequences if they don't participate in their teacher's study. When we add AI into this, it further complicates it, right? Because legitimately, students may not want their data processed by AI, right? Also, if you're, let's say, supporting doctoral students, there's a not zero risk to their intellectual property if you're going to use a public AI tool. So to address the first issue, right, our framework explicitly prohibits excluding participants because they don't want to have their data analyzed by AI. So consent for having your data analyzed by AI must be entirely separate and strictly optional. So participants can participate in the broader study, not have their data analyzed by AI, right? The second issue, again, we refer back to the AI security hierarchy. When dealing with sensitive data, such as student intellectual property, conscientious researcher must prioritize participant welfare. So this means choosing a highly secure local AI model, even if it's not as powerful as the latest version of Claude or Gemini. Now, tricky one, qualitative analysis, right? I'm going to focus on cultural nuance. So most popular AI models are predominantly trained on Anglophone and Western-centric corporate, right? We have recent research into the bias that the AI demonstrates, right? And we have the risk of it flattening cultural nuance. So when we use these tools to analyze the complex discourse of our diverse EAP community, the AI might experience or interpret their experiences through an entirely foreign cultural framework, effectively misrepresenting their authentic voices, right? And these models don't merely reflect societal norms. As we can see, they can actively start shaping them as more and more people interact with them, more and more people read AI outputs. So obviously, accepting AI analysis at face value risks amplifying those stereotypes, right, and marginalizing minority perspectives in the academic record. So our ethical framework mandates that researchers obviously must not treat AI outputs as definitive. They must carefully select culturally appropriate models, maybe not the most popular ones, but the ones most appropriate for their target population. They need to actively audit against the raw data, right, to ensure no cultural meaning has been lost or distorted. However, we go beyond researcher auditing. So we strongly encourage researchers to incorporate community validation if they're going to use an AI-assisted methodology, right? So involve the participants in evaluating the AI-generated analysis of their own data. So by asking participants to verify, refine, or hopefully challenge these interpretations, we turn a significant methodological moving into the final part. This begins with transparent disclosure in plain language, right? So researchers are not always good at writing participant information sheets that can explain things to participants. So what we've done is we've moved beyond sort of blanket statements, and we have a modular approach. So we have specific phrasing for each level of that AI security hierarchy, right? So if you're using a high risk one, we have specific phrasing for that. If it's low risk, specific phrasing for that. So this way, the participants are not overwhelmed by technical jargon. Now, the next connecting link in this is perhaps the most important, which is the unbundling of the consent process. So unfortunately, with a lot of research projects, far too often we see potential participants given a single consent option, right? Sign here or click this button and you agree to everything. Right? If you refuse, you're completely excluded. So when it comes to AI, right, we have mandated that the consent must be completely unbundled from general study population or participation. So everything related to AI requires distinct optional opt-in checkboxes with the clear phrasing that you can see here, right? So hopefully this simple structural change acts as a mechanism that genuinely preserves participant agency and respects their intellectual autonomy. Now, I just want to sort of wrap up with what I think is a crucial point. Ethical AI use in research is not solely about data security. Right? So even if you're using a completely secure local on-device model with no external data transfer, XJTLU requires that you disclose this to participants and get their consent. Right? Why? 3 reasons. First, we take a human-centric framework. Right? So requiring disclosure forces you, the researcher, to acknowledge that you're ultimately responsible for the scholarly output. Second, there is a fundamental technological difference at play. So LLMs process, interpret, and generate meaning in probabilistic ways. So this is a epistemological, should never write that into a presentation, but it's an epistemological shift in how data is actually used and understood. Right? But ultimately, I think it's about participant dignity. So participants have a fundamental right to know if their personal and intellectual contributions are being processed or analyzed by a person or by an algorithm. Right? So they need the transparent disclosure and the opt-in consent so that we have respect for their autonomy over their own data. So this allows them to decide if they're truly comfortable with their words and ideas being processed in that way. So in conclusion, I want to reframe how we think about ethical requirements, right? So it's about not policing or creating barriers. It's about empowering practitioners to confidently explore AI in their own scholarship. And I think that by doing that, we gain invaluable firsthand insight that can directly inform our teaching. Right? So I know it has in my own case. So when we understand how an AI model interprets data or struggles with cultural nuance, we are better positioned to teach AI literacy in our EAP classrooms. Right? So I hope that this has been a useful or informative presentation. I'll just sort of leave my references up on the screen for now, but I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much, Trevor. This was a wonderful, really thorough talk that really highlights the need for development in this area. I have many questions for you. Partly, I would like to know whether this has been published anywhere, because I'm fairly sure we need to develop something like this at Leeds for our research and our scholarship. But maybe I can talk to you later. We have one. Oh, sorry, Trevor. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I haven't published it yet because we just implemented the updates earlier this spring. So it is, shall we say, hot off the press. Yes. But I am hoping to sort of be able to share it more widely because I do want these ethical requirements for using AI to become explicitly embedded in our workflows, to sort of enable but also encourage more responsible use.
Yeah, I think it will become very, very useful as a starting point to see how to adapt those principles in the different contexts. Yeah, certainly I was taking a lot of notes. Thank you. So we have a question here. Sorry, I can't see your name. Oh, Eliza.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the very detailed breakdown of the policy. It looks